Oh, we're on the job again. The plumber came here and had to cut open a hole in here. Looks like to access their shower, redo their piping. The plumber did his job. He inspected it, so it's good to go. Good thing here, he cut out this area nice and square, so we left the cutout piece. If these pieces are not wet, you can reuse them to put them back. Sometimes it's easier to reuse them. But on this, of course, there's only a stud here in the center. So we're going to have to put a stud on the left and the right. These pipes are kind of tight, so you want to mark these pipes. You don't want to put a screw where this black pipe is. So sometimes you mark it with a pencil. Do not put a screw there. But we're going to tighten up the old studs. We're going to put some backing there, reuse the patch, re-secure it, tape coat, and then we're going to do a spray knockdown texture. It's not the best looking texture, but we're just going to spray that area. But first things first, going to have to put some masking on the baseboard, mask up the area, basically to contain our overspray from the texture. The texture goes everywhere. So we want to plastic it off, contain our mess, and get everything ready. Get some wood backing, 2x4s, 1x2s, anything works. Wood sheeting, some guys like to use those drywall clips, metal clips, which I don't like to use, but some guys swear they're the best. But I'm just going to use some 1x3s that I have on hand. Just something to screw to. You need something to screw the sheetrock to. Everybody thinks that's okay, but then this side's loose, that side's loose, and then you can get a crack there. So we always add backing on each side, or at least on the top, bottom, or the sides. Ideal world, top, bottom, each side, something to screw to on 4 sides, but a patch this small, 24 inches, all we need something on each side, and that's good. So we're going to have something to screw to here, something to screw to there, something to screw to there, so it'll be a nice and tight patch. But first things first here, let's get some masking down, get this area contained, get some wood backing, get all of our supplies needed in here. We need a screw gun, drywall screws, masking tape, plastic, fiberglass mesh tape. Just get everything sheetrocked, hung, ready for mud. That's our first step process. Get it ready for mudding. For masking, I just like to use an 1.5" basic masking tape. Nothing special. Everybody loves to use blue tape. Blue tapes I just use on finished wood cabinets because it's expensive. So I just use a regular tape. Baseboard's dusty, of course, swipe away the dust. Tight area like this, so masking is always fun. Masking the wall just so it gets texture on the wall. This is a masking machine, of course you're not going to have this. You could just put plastic on the wall. You don't want to get texture on walls that you don't plan on painting. If you get texture on this wall, you're going to have to sand, primer, and paint. So only expose the areas that you're going to actually texture and mud, so you don't have to paint other walls. Alright, wood backing there. Here, this one's kind of tight. 1.25" screws for 1/2" sheetrock. I like to mark the stud here with a screw. marked and secured. Wood backing, hold it in place. I usually get 2 screws in it to hold it in place. Top, bottom. Let's do one in the middle. Now you have something to screw to. Strong. Just add one to the left side. This one's kind of goofy area here, so I'm going to have to get it around the pipe. I actually have to do a cheater screw. This is a cheater screw to have hold on the stud. So I'm going to use a longer screw if you got it. Just going to put this here. All that is just to hold it. And then the trouble areas like this. Get it in here. Able to get wood in here, you're going to have to cut this patch back further to the next stud, and you don't want to have to do that if possible. I'm holding it, got something to nail the screw to real tight. Get a couple screws in it. Let's add one more. Let's pull out our backing screw. Remember, there's a pipe here and a pipe here, so you can even mark it with a pencil. Take your pencil, and you're not going to put screws here, but just in case. Plumbers shouldn't have pipes this close to the drywall. They have the hole inside of the wall, but they want to put their pipes right against the drywall. I don't understand that. That's just peace of mind, so I know I don't put a screw, even though I know I'm not going to be screwing there, just to remind myself there's a thing there. Or you can even take a picture of it with your phone so you remember that there's pipes there. But a good plumbing job, pipes and everything should be away from the wall. Center of the wall is usually what I see most. Like this one's good because it's back there. This one's up against the wall. It is what it is. Since they kept this original piece, we're going to reuse it. It's not damaged, not water damage. Just double check it here. There's a nail pop in the back. And then we're just going to re-secure it. If it fits nice, then we're going to secure it. I'm going to use original stud. Most guys don't like to use the original holes. It looks like they backed out holes, but I'm going to put screws in those holes just to fill in the holes with something. Plenty of screws, every 2 to 4 inches. The main stud's secure. Now I'm going to hit my backers that I added. Remember I added the backers? Now it's nice and tight. Every 2 to 4 inches. Nice and tight. Nice and tight. Left side. Every 2 to 4 inches. Nice and tight. Let's do one more. Alright. Everything's strong, secure. Remember that pipe was right here. Now we got it hung, it's all secure. Sometimes I like to push on it, make sure that it's not loose. Like right here, it's kind of loose on the top, so I'm going to add one more. Why not? Screws are cheap. Crack outs are not cheap. I'm done with my screws, my screw gun. I'm going to go charge up my battery, put my tools away. I don't need the pencil. Let's put all this stuff away. I don't want to be tripping on it in this little room. Next step, 6-inch knife. You can also take a piece of this with your 6-inch knife if you didn't do it beforehand. Paint sample. keep a little piece just in case. You need a paint sample. Piece like that, size of your palm, is good enough to take it to a paint matching store. So always keep a piece that paint match. Notice I didn't take all the drywall off. I just took the thing off. Just the face of it, the texture. I'm going to scrape all this before we tape it. I'm going to scrape out past the area where there's rough texture, so when I mud on it, I don't get chatters and goobers. Fiberglass mesh tape. Everybody loves it or hates it. I love it because I use it correctly. Right now there's a sticky back to it. It sticks, but it's not very good. So sometimes I'll stick it and then it won't stay. So I use a spray glue, which is an optional product, or I can just go and mix a little bit of mud and kind of pre-fill it and then put the tape in the mud that I put. But I'm just going to use a little of this tack spray. This is a trade secret. Doesn't need much. Corner bead drywall adhesive. It's just a tack spray for this fiberglass. Some fiberglasses actually have real good stickiness. This type doesn't. Look, it doesn't like to stick to old walls. It likes to stick to new sheetrock. That just holds it in place. I don't want to put all this tape on it and then go get my mud and I come back and the tape fell off the patch and I have to put my pan and knives down, put my mud tools down, and then put the tape back on the wall and grab my pan and knife and hope it stays. So that's why I just use this tack spray. It doesn't do nothing except keeps the tape tacked on the wall. Tape it really good, all the gaps, everything taped. If you had any gaps in here, you'd probably pre-fill it first before you do a tape, but this is a nice tight patch. Push down with your 6. Fiberglass mesh. There's also fiber fuse tape, stuff like this. With the fiberglass, you can put the fiberglass on and coat right away. Paper tapes, fiber fuses, you have to put mud down first. Put the tape down, wipe out the mud, let the mud set up, then coat it. So it takes longer to use fiber fuses and stuff like that. So that's why I use fiberglass mesh tape. It don't crack if you use the correct stuff. So I'm done with this, done with that. I'm going to put all my hanging tools away. Everything's ready for mud. So now I'm going to mud it. I'm going to do a first coat over this. I'm going to use a 5-minute quick set mud that I mix up a little bit in a pan, coat it all out, let it set up, slick it out, and then turn around and second coat it. If you've never done drywall mudding before, just stick to an all-purpose joint compound. All-purpose joint compounds have to dry overnight. Then you sand it, second coat it, sand it, third coat, then texture. But let's get this all first coated, get all of our hanging tools put away, get them out of here, and then concentrate on the first coat mud. Most guys like to use a 10-inch knife. I always stick to my 12-inch knife. Strike in the tape. That just gets the mud in the grooves. Strike it in. Strike it in. Strike it in. Almost like a pre-fill technique. That mud gets pushed inside the grooves of the fiberglass. Now you can coat the area. I'm going to coat this whole area since it's down by the baseboard to the angle. I'm just going to coat this whole area out. One big patch. That way it blends in. This is a quick set mud, so I gotta work fast with it. I want to get the mud on, coated, and I want all the mud out of my pan cleaned up before it starts setting up. Of course, if this was a joint compound, you'd coat it and just let this sit overnight. Then you'd have to turn around and sand it the next day. I'm using a 5-minute mud, more professional grade material. If you never mudded before, never picked up a pan and knife, do not use hot muds. Just use a joint compound. Hot muds, mix a little more than I need, but get it all out of your pan. Go wash out your pans and knives while that's setting up. Next up, we're going to come in here as it's setting up, It's 5 minutes, so I'm going to come back in here in about 5 to 7 minutes. Once it's not wet no more, I'm going to sponge it and slick it out with a damp sponge. And
still kind of damp. Sponge, damp, wet sponge. Nice, straight, clean 6-inch knife. Get rid of the edges. Get rid of the edges first. I went against the wall into the angle. So now we have to only get rid of this edge. Since I went down to the baseboard and to the angle. Take your 6-inch knife. Sponge, I kind of go over it with the sponge. This is hot mud technique only. This is not a joint compound technique. Hot mud. 5 minutes, 20 minutes, 40 minute, 90 minute. This is how you work with these hot muds. This is more of a pro grade material. I'm just taking off the extra mud. If you do a slick out technique correctly, you can almost treat it like you're doing a second coat or a third coat. Like that. Took off the extra mud. Feathered in that edge. You want to feather in the edge on spray textures. Most textures you always want to feather in the edge. Right now I could probably turn around and texture it and it'd be good, but I'm going to go mix up a little bit more 5-minute mud and I'm going to do a really tight skim coat over this. The second coat, if you do a first coat correctly and it's sanded or slicked out good, your second coat's just a fill-in, to fill in any chatters, goobers, imperfections. But your first coat should do your majority of your coating. You can slick out any direction. You're just taking off the extra materials, getting rid of lap marks, stuff like that. So I'm going to go mix another bit of mud. While I'm mixing that mud, this will set up. Alright, a little more. So let's go ahead and get a second coat. Mud's a little thinner than your first coat. Every coat you do is going to be a tad bit thinner than the prior coat. So we're just doing a tight skim, so it doesn't need to be heavy, thick mud. Using my 12-inch knife, and I'm just going over everything again. Tight skim coat. If the patch was ugly and deep still, you'd leave the mud on just a little bit thicker. But this patch looks perfect as is. I'm just doing a tight coat. Tight coat. Slick coat. You can also go the opposite direction of your first coat. A lot of guys like to do that. They swear by that. But this one just needs to go this direction, doesn't matter. Alright, same thing, let that set up. Clean the mud out of his hand. It is a quick set mud, so I gotta clean it all up. Clean my tools. You don't want this stuff to dry on your tools. It'll set up like a cement in your tools. And it'll ruin your tools or be a lot of extra work trying to scrape all that dried, set up mud in there. So go clean your tools. While you're cleaning your tools, this will start setting up, then you can prepare for the next process. The next process on this, I'm going to slick it out again, and then it's a spray texture, so I need the spray hopper, air compressor, the hose, and then I'm going to use a joint compound for the texture. So I got to get all that ready, so there's plenty of steps here while this is setting up. Second coat,
so I'm getting everything ready. This will really set up
the first coat. Got to slick it out. Clean 6-inch knife, damp sponge, get rid of the edges. That's the most important thing, is feathering that edge. Feather the edge. An angle down to the baseboard. You go the opposite direction even of your coat. Don't fill any chatters in the opposite direction. Real tight against the baseboard. We don't want a big clump of mud against the baseboard, so make sure your baseboard's feathered in really tight. All that extra mud I'm taking off. Look at that. All that extra mud. Sometimes you just need enough mud to coat it. You don't need to just put a big old mud hump on the wall, a big patch. Nice tight coats. That's with the tight coat, and I'm still taking mud off. The mud's going where it needs to go. Everything looks good. Some guys even like to chip out down by the baseboard, make sure it's real tight, so when you pull your masking tape, it doesn't mess up your texture because you clumped up the mud on the bottom. Check your angles, check your edges, check your base area. Let that set up another couple minutes. And then I'm going to get this spray hopper. I'm going to spray this with a spray knockdown. I'm using a middle tip for my spray hopper. That's for like a splatter, heavy orange peel. Most hoppers have 3 tips. I always use the middle tips, the go-to. Using an all-purpose joint compound, thinned down like a heavy pancake batter consistency. Well, let's go ahead and let this set up a few more minutes. In the meantime,
my
get
hopper
your air
ready.
compressor and texture tools
Little
ready.
tip adjustment. It's down here. I'm using my little air compressor, so this one kind of runs out of air quickly. The reason I'm using the little ones because I'm upstairs and I'm just doing a little patch, so I don't want to bring my big 60-pound compressor up the stairs. So I may have to spray this a little bit and then let the air compressor get more air in the tank and then spray it again. But let's go ahead. It's going to get noisy because the air compressor is loud and it takes forever to fill up because it's my little air compressor for doing these small patches.
It actually did pretty good for that small patch. Knockdown. A lot of guys like to let their mud set up, knock down. That's fine. If you're doing patches in the summer, it's really hot, you don't want to let them set up because they'll drag when you go to knock them down. But knockdown, I use a straight 6-inch knife, clean, damp. 6-inch knife is easier to use than a big knife, especially for patchwork. If you're doing a whole ceiling, whole wall, yeah, you'd use a bigger knife. But for patchwork, I'm not pushing down. I'm literally gliding the knife. I'm barely even holding the knife. Look. So this just takes experience of doing this, lightly knocking it down. The knife's just gliding over the surface. If you put any pressure on this, you're going to cause flat spots, which you don't want. Lightly knock it down. Trick here is I always keep a damp sponge. I keep my 6 clean. Sometimes just that layer of moisture on that 6 helps it glide across that texture easier. I've seen guys, they just go all day and they don't even wipe down, clean their knockdown knives. But I always have a sponge in my hand when I do knockdowns. You're not getting crazy with the knockdown. If you miss some areas, that's fine. You're going to have to sand this before you paint it, so any missed areas will get sanded down to give you that knockdown appearance. Sometimes over knockdown will make the job worse because this stuff's going to shrink back a little bit. So you want to leave it a little heavier than the existing if possible, because it's going to shrink back. Sponge. Some guys like to sponge the edge, just the overspray little dots. You don't have to do this because when you sand it the next day or when you sand it, they'll get rid of those dots. Remember how I said on the baseboard, you pull it tight because when you pull this masking tape here, if you left a clump of mud down there, you'd pull all that mud, and that was a perfect masking removal. Same thing here on the wall. Perfect. Now I'm just pulling my masking. It don't get any better than that. Next step, let it dry for 24 hours. Be careful, it is wet to touch. Next day, lightly sand it, a little more effort on the edge, just glide over it. If this was a sandpaper, I'd just go over it real easy. Easy swipes, a little more effort on the edge to transition the new texture into the old texture. Then primer, then paint. You could take your paint match in the meantime while this is drying. You go get your new paint, get your sanding block or 150 grit sandpaper, primer, then paint. You'll be ready to go. But let this dry. Also, masking. Everybody wants to leave the masking up because they know they're going to paint the next day, but just pull your masking because we got texture all over the masking. And sometimes if you let this texture dry and then you pull the masking the next day, that mud is dried on there and you'll pull the mud off the wall. So always pull your masking. Just remask if you're going to paint the next day. But paint sample, it's all textured with spray knockdown. Pretty easy patch. It's just a tight area around the toilet, so those are always fun. So that was the only hard thing here. That's pretty good to go. Then they can put their toilet paper holder back. I recommend they do that after they primer and paint. Good to go. Hope you like this video. We also have other videos on the channel, playlists, drywall repairs, patching, stress cracks, easy do-it-yourself type repairs. So if you haven't done it already, please subscribe, please like, and please comment. And jump into my other videos and do the same. Hey, thanks for viewing, thanks for subscribing.